All right, shall we begin? All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Breakaway session number 13, the development and construction dynamics, specifically construction dynamics during COVID. Today we have an esteemed panel of experts who've experienced this, and the panelists are William Price. Bill is the country manager for Enel Green Power, and he's been in South Africa since July 2016. He began his career in nuclear, but we excuse him for that, and he's now moved over to the green side. Bill has an illustrious career that spans years and years of hands-on experience in the energy sector, and as country manager for Enel, he's had to be at the coalface of dealing with what has been happening during the COVID situation in South Africa. Our second speaker is Hani Smith. Hani is the program director for Siemens Gamesa, and she's been responsible for construction of 9 wind farms in South Africa. She's responsible for full EPC, and that means Hanley has also had to deal with what's been happening in our lockdown in South Africa. And last but not least is Paul Holtzweber. Paul is the senior manager for construction at Vestas, and he is based in Johannesburg and has 10 years experience in manufacturing of wind turbines and working across various jurisdictions, Europe, Africa, and Australia. Paul, like all the others, being here during the COVID, especially the initial level 5 and level 4 lockdown, also has great experience on what it's like to get to COD under COVID. So without further ado, I'm going to just set the scene and then hand over to Bill to start us off with his views on what happened. So when we hit lockdown level 5, as we all know, the whole country came to a grinding halt. The Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy said that existing power plants must please carry on, but everything else must stop. And that meant power plants under construction that had finally got to be closed under round 4 were now grinding to a halt. As an industry, we scrambled. We did our best to lobby government to see how we could lift some of those restrictions. And ultimately, the restrictions were lifted when the levels were reduced. But without further ado, let me hand over to Bill, who was actually living through it at the time. Bill, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity to be part of the panel and give some viewpoints on the construction aspects and how the pandemic affected our projects. I'm going to share my screen so you can see the presentation I put together. So please let me know if you're able to see it okay. So I'd like to, let's start with the general aspects, because it's a theme of construction dynamics. When we're building projects, all IPTs start with this business development phase, construction phase, and of course operational phase. The construction phase is usually the most challenging. It's the say most disruptive to the communities. You're bringing in heavy equipment. You're bringing in a workforce. You're making some noise and dust. You work with the community a lot to mitigate these aspects. We hire a lot of local peoples, and So it's generally a very hectic process. We have schedules, we have a lot of challenges with equipment delivery, and of course, this is in my experience of working on many projects. This is the first time we've all experienced in the middle of a construction project a pandemic. So while we have this huge, what I would say, disruption phase of a project development from pandemic, and it's really quite challenging. For us, we have 5 projects in construction now, and one of our first projects that became a problem for us is the Windaba project, which is it's in the Bedford Cookhouse area. It's a 140 megawatt project, and why this project was truly a challenge for us is we did initial synchronization in December of 2019, and we were planning on doing our grid code testing. We had units online. We were producing generation to grid, and we planned on doing our grid code testing March, April. Of course, the pandemic happened, lockdown happened, all that stopped. And so while we were producing power to the grid, the government mandate was projects in commercial operation. Since the project wasn't commercial, we had to stop all that activity. And so we had to even shut down the units that were in operation, as well as de-energize the substation. So the rest of the projects, all the projects were shut down. We sent staff home. We secured cranes. We, in many cases, even with site teams, we sent people because we knew that the travel restrictions were going to happen, and we were able to, the flights were going to occur. Some of the staff that we had wasn't South Africa. We had to send them home, so that activity took place. So as you said, Mark, then there's a lot of lobbying efforts and to restart the construction activities, and that's where I'd like to talk about a little more of the presentation and what activities we did to exist while with COVID. The first thing is, of course, every project you have to do COVID preventative measures that you look at site. This is a particular chart of the same project I just represented, which is our Windaba site. Key things, most of us know these things, so there's not a lot of reason to go into major detail of just general measures. Self-check at home, self-check at workplace. In particular, what we also did is, when we say self-check at home, many people were transported to site through various forms of transportation and uses of taxi services. So those individuals had to be checked before they even boarded a taxi. Obviously, clearly, if they had made it to site and they were at a high temperature, then it potentially affects people in the taxis as well as at the site, or having to figure out how to bring them back home. So all these checks, so you had numerous checks throughout the day. So those are all a lot of stuff that we all know. Here's some just activities that we did, we call mitigation. We first of all, you start with training. Most people, what is COVID-19? When we were all familiar with what it is now. Back in March, April, there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of stuff you get on the media, some things that weren't readily available. And I would say even these remote communities were say I'm currently in Johannesburg. The lockdown was considered quite serious, and people really adhered to the lockdown. It was almost eerie because you'd wake up in the morning and no cars and nothing. In the remote communities, it seemed like business as usual. They didn't really adhere as much. So when you started talking about COVID-19, they'd say, well, what's that? Seems like the message wasn't always easily available out to the communities. And so training people, training the locals, and training staff, a lot of people didn't take it seriously. So this was also a problem. So a lot of regular training. Of course, we held meetings. We talked about social distancing. While it seems kind of obvious, but at the time, people just didn't. You'd watch them, and they would still get together. We So we had to train people, and even when we had our morning meetings and social distancing, we had to create biological hazards, waste bins that were installed in our paramedics office. Obviously, this is for the disposal of any potential we consider as a COVID potential we had to properly dispose of. This is something we didn't have before, so we had to establish that. We increased paramedic security staff and safety officers so we can get people in and out of the site. Of course, the sanitizers, and then we employed a daily work cleaning process where we were cleaning offices and common locations, lunchroom activities, etc. Of course, we put a lot of signage to remind people. The temperature scans, we also, we recorded that, touched on that before. And we had this construction related, we had an isolation room. We had to have a particular room that if anybody did have a temperature, we would bring them to this room and isolate them until we can arrange transportation and training. A lot of common things such that had handles, or here in this case, we had water bottles that we or water, water dispenser that had a common touch area. We removed those, and we started using water bottles. Of course, we recycled the plastic. Interesting enough, this alcohol testing, we had a couple devices I'll show you later. We testing employees or staff workers or all people come on site. They're required to go through an alcohol testing process. With the implement of COVID, how do we do? So we were using these straws. We have a technology I'll show you a little bit. It's called Sober Eye, where we use a retinal scan. We could no longer use that because it's actually physically touching the skin. So it was a technology that was working pretty effective for us that we had to go back to this old breathalyzer type activity. And of course, the continued training. This is another project, some just examples of our Oyster Bay project. Same stuff we just talked about. It gives you different pictures of how we did maintain social distancing. These little where people are separate, but those are morning toolbox talks or activities where we give daily updates. Normally this is a gathering where people get together because it's easier to talk to people when we're closer together, but so you can imagine having this type of discussion where everybody's all spread out. And you can see the examples of the personal protective equipment that they wore. This is a slide that just gives you an idea of what we did, and like all sites did, is this is our Windaba site, where we established site corridors. So with these little circles show you work areas. These change from day to day, and what we do is we assign so many people in these work areas. So if someone was potentially contaminated with or had the virus, that it only affect the people in that work circle. So we didn't commingle these workforces, and this is so that we would contain. So these work individuals went on shifts. They had lunch separately. They had so we kept these work groups completely separate. And this map changed. So we had a designated distribution of site work. So we implemented this, and while it's normally a construction process, you're working quite heavily, and you have lunch at a certain time. We certainly took shifts when you come to work and what have you. So this is a good example of that. This is just a one-day site map. Last thing I'd like to talk about is generally the issues caused by the government travel restrictions. Not only do we have travel restrictions between country, we also had travel restrictions between provinces. So getting most of the construction people to get them to site, the local government would request they go on quarantine. So you can imagine someone would go on rotation, a construction site. They don't, a lot of the supervision not always lives in the community. So they would come to the site, and if they had to take 2 months or 2 weeks in isolation, that pretty much prevented them from doing their works on site. So we had to manage that. Also, we sent this the site team back to their other country. They couldn't come back. So the question is who is providing the construction support going forward? And in our case, I wanted to bring up one. We started doing like commissioning support. So commissioning support, we used we used our operational staff. We used even the manufacturer's site staff from other areas. So we trained them, and we made commissioning support people out of our existing operations. So we had the luxury of being able to do that. As I think this will be a nice, good best practice going forward. Why? Because our operations staff who are trained on construction get to see evolution, starting stop equipment, breaker evolutions, how are things putting together, and it's really worked out well. Because normally when you operate a project, you don't want to start and stop it. You want to do steady state operation. This is this last slide, and I'll hand over back to you, Mark. This is this sober eye that this is a tool we use to identify people coming to work. Another cool device we use is this thing called smart glasses. Smart glasses are a device that attaches to your hard hat helmet. So if you're doing commissioning or doing something or doing a safety inspection, so when you're walking around, you have these smart glasses on, and it shows this video screen to someone else that's connected to the system. So if you're troubleshooting an item, you have these glasses on, you have someone that can actually talk to you and say, touch that or do that, or do this safety inspection. So it's almost like they're there. So we've used heavily these smart glasses all throughout both our construction process, our commissioning, safety inspections, all different aspects of the site. The limitation with the smart glasses, of course, is to have a connection, you have it requires some internet or network connection. So this is not so easy at site. So we had to establish better connections to allow this tool to work for us. Much easier in operational sites, not so easy in construction sites where those things are not established. This other is just a safety device to use for removing heavy equipment, so people are aware and we don't have any accidents. That's it, Mark.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. We're going to move on to Hani, and then after Hani, we'll move on to next speaker, and then we'll have a discussion post that. So Hani, over to you to get your experiences.
Okay, well, maybe a little bit more on lessons learned and what to be ready for with the next pandemic. For me, there's really basically two main important points, and the one that came out was the team, and specifically the locality of the team, and the second one was how to implement effective COVID prevention measures and how to mitigate the impact. So starting with the team specifically, I think it has never been more important to have a fully localized team. And although this was always the intention of the REAP program, and I believe that the industry has done really well in localizing the construction teams, this focus was mainly on long-term service resources as well as the longer term of the construction, which involves maybe the construction or the management. But there's some specialized items like the SCADA and the commissioning that is typically overlooked due to the fact that it's really specialized and it's for a short term. And during round 3, Siemens Gamesa basically decided that we would go for a completely independent team and we've identified some resources. And we're fortunate enough to expose them already in round 3 to these type of installations as well as the commissioning. And I cannot emphasize the success or the dividends that we got from having this. I mean, what we were essentially stuck with when the restrictions hit was we were fully done with construction, but we had basically 2 wind farms that needed commissioning and needed SCADA, and basically just taking it to COD. And this way we managed to actually achieve this. The second thing I want to highlight with regards to the team is, I think the whole industry needs to be focused on developing a flexible team. For again, for us, this worked really well when you develop team members in different areas of the construction, and set yourself out to coach them, to not have the opinion that they only have one job to do. But if I need them to be support for commissioners, or if I need them to go and check the quality, if I need them to be a stockkeeper, if I need to be them, or whatever. I mean, not all jobs are interchangeable, but a lot of the items, if you coach the guys and you expose them enough, this has a great advantage with mitigating your risk of your dependence on key resources. If you lose resources due to COVID, or due to whatever reason, really, that's the point, is you're not dependent on one guy. And also this creates exposure for the resources. They can go into a field that they really want to do. So then the second part of what I wanted to talk about was obviously the effect of COVID prevention measures and how to deal with the impact. And I think Bill has done a brilliant job with his presentation in showing exactly how to implement the COVID prevention rules, if you want, and maybe even more than what is required. What I want to re-emphasize, and they've done it as well, is I think we're in an industry where it's fairly easy to prevent exposure, and we've done basically the same as what Bill did, whereby we've created this bubbles, if you want, with resources grouped together, smaller resources, and they were basically living together, they were driving together, they were working together. And in this case, even if they were exposed, but not had any symptoms, you could quarantine on site. It's available. It's possible to arrange that way. The cost was a real threat in the beginning. I think implementing all these measures. And I think especially in the beginning, there was a heavy burden with the cost layout for the additional PPE. But I think it was also quickly offset by the opportunity of less traveling. So I think this worked out quite all right for us, at least. And I believe that we are now growing to a point where we're a little bit more mature with what type of PPE is needed. I mean, we went from disposables to permanent, where we just clean and social distancing and all of the likes. And also what this brought was the fact that not all construction meetings have to be on site. And I think this is a brilliant opportunity. If you're on site, be there because there's some specific actions, but not because you want to sit in a room together to discuss progress. And then lastly, really quickly, just dealing with the planning. And this is by far the most painful, I think, for all projects across the world. There's no one fit solution. I have no clever plans. I mean, by the nature of projects, they're all unique. So they're in a unique phase with unique challenges, unique technology, etc., etc. But I want to state the fact that you need to revise the schedule. You need to review this, and the frequency of this needs to be stepped up. And you cannot tire of mitigating them. So if you have a delay on the one side, see if you can reshuffle and do something about it. And what is great about this whole thing is, I think for the first time we're all in a position to think a little bit differently. And I want to say by brainstorming mitigations, we're opening up where everybody's in a different mindset to engage with our stakeholders, with our resources, with our customers, even with our competition. I mean, and see if there's a way. And I believe somewhere through this whole process, some of these opportunities will determine the way forward, even past COVID. And maybe we're ready for the next pandemic. So, thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Hani. So we'll now move on to a perspective from another OEM. We're going to move on to Paul Holzweber from Vestas.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very sorry I cannot be at the live session today, but lucky enough, technology offers us the opportunity to pre-record it. Yeah, my name is Paul Holzweber from Vestas. I'm responsible for the execution of our project portfolio in Southern Africa, and yeah, I have the pleasure to say a few words on the challenges of construction projects under the COVID-19 pandemic conditions. Yes, Vestas, we have in round four projects currently, and they all have a COD only middle or second half of next year. So we got hit at a rather early stage, I would say, with COVID, and the hard lockdown happened for us actually before we had any turbine components on site. So yeah, we got away a bit lucky here, but still quite some complications and challenges came, of course, along with that. And yeah, I wanna summarize a bit here the experience we had on our sides, and I wanna pack it in three categories, so to say. And the one is the health and safety measures, which had to be put in place, and the challenges around that. Secondly, I want to speak on mobility, which was of course also quite a big challenge for us. And lastly, the delay of works on several areas. So starting with health and safety, I mean, that was to me really the smallest issue actually. I think the industry is quite mature in that aspect, and there is good systems in place. So it was really more just adding some additional elements to the systems which are in place already. Some sanitizers, some additional social distancing, maybe some more office containers, additional PPE, and all those things, which added a few additional costs and complications, but nothing too big to worry of. What I found quite interesting, and I see that was a specific challenge for South Africa also, since we have quite a big workforce from the local communities. Yeah, and the biggest fear was, or my biggest fear, that yes, we have all our measures there on site, where we have our health and safety officer and representatives looking after it. But yeah, people go home in the evening and maybe don't behave as disciplined as we would want to. So we put actually a quite big focus on education and trying to tell our employees and workers also more about the virus and the danger of it, and really try to also change the mindset and to take that situation also serious in private life, and act accordingly and take hygiene more serious, etc. And I do feel that worked out pretty well. I mean, we had a few cases on our sides, luckily all mild and really just a few, and it didn't spread further, and despite a quite big workforce there. So yes, I can confidently say with that the measures worked, and I'm really happy for that, because the fears at the beginning of the pandemic were, of course, that it would spread much further and maybe shut down sites, and yeah, we didn't have that situation. So yeah, that was a bit on the health and safety measures. When I take then the second category, mobility, that gave quite a bit of a headache. I mean, after the round 4 delays, I guess we we all see that the industry is not as local as we want it yet to be. So also for our construction projects, which are now the first ones for us since 2016, we are quite reliant on supervision and site manager resources from Europe or elsewhere overseas. So yeah, and those people we unfortunately couldn't get in time. We are lucky enough that as Vestas we have a quite big global pool of site managers, and a few of them, although they are living elsewhere, are South African nationals, which made it easier than still to travel. And what we did then, we tried to, or not only we tried to, we succeeded to upskill some of our local service technicians also to installation supervision. So we ran them through the GWO installation training, put them together with one of our experienced site managers. Of course, also a lot with remote communication with the team in Europe. But yeah, with that we managed to upskill and empower a few local technicians for different tasks, which was actually a positive, nice side effect of that whole situation. Otherwise, I guess we would have taken it much slower. But so to say, we were pushed here to take those steps, and they also worked out successfully. Yeah, and luckily with those measures, we had no delays because of mobility issues that we couldn't continue any works. So now coming to the third part, after health and safety, mobility, I want to talk a bit on the delays on several work packages. And I mean, of course, we're all aware we had the lockdown in South Africa where site works came to a complete standstill for a couple of weeks. But yeah, also the supply chain was, of course, heavily impacted. The tower factory in South Africa, but also all our main component factories overseas experienced shutdowns of various lengths. And on top of that came then also delays on the transport side, because once transport was possible again and ports were open, there was a congestion. So it took also again a few weeks longer to get actually the components through. So yeah, that shuffled up our programs quite a bit. But again, what worked well is that's pretty much for each work package was the same situation. I mean, it was on manufacturing, it was on site works, it was on transport. Everything was delayed for a couple of weeks to the right, which made it actually not too worse than for the programming. It would have been much worse to have, let's say, only the site works delayed but nothing else. So yeah, also with the recognition of time, which seems to be likely to be given under the PPAs, the whole shift of the program to the right was a challenge and a headache, but it also worked out pretty well. So time wasn't so much the issue for the delays, but of course costs are, and that ends up pretty much with each party. I mean, we know our clients have, of course, some damage. We have our subcontractors and also do the SMEs, and yeah, there is some financial damage to all the parties. But it looks of it, no relief. That's of course not ideal, but yeah, that's the situation we are dealing with. So yeah, those were the three categories where I see the COVID-19 pandemic impacting our site operations. When people ask me on my work experience during that time and whether it was busy or not so busy, like typically, yeah, it's expected, oh, not so busy because yeah, it was not much happening for a few weeks. But yeah, I guess as most of you can agree with me, it was actually I would say way busier than normally, and not only in South Africa but also for Vestas globally, because yeah, we are still executing the projects. Yes, a few weeks delayed, but but still the same workload is there, plus a lot on top of it, juggling resources, making plan Bs, schedule updates, receiving claims, sending claims, etc. So overall, yeah, it was a lot of additional challenges for the whole team. But I guess also in the project environment, that's what we are used to. We're taking on the curveballs which are thrown to us and manage it. So yeah, everyone took a bit of hit on that, of course, and it was some frustrating weeks and exhausting weeks. But I also feel the stakeholders were drawn a bit closer together, and I've experienced that collaboration, with our clients and contractors was in general very, very positive. So yeah, overall also a lot of learning and some positive side effects, and yeah, that's what we also want to focus on. I mean, take what's being thrown on us, manage it, and take the best out of it and move forward. Yeah, so if there are any questions or comments, I'm sure any of the other speakers on the panel can address them as equally qualified. And with that, I hand back to Mark. Thanks a lot.
All right, Paul, thank you very much for that. And thank you to all of our panelists. So the three of you mentioned costs. I'm interested to know, did the disruption of COVID put significant costs onto your construction programs? Or I know, Hani, you mentioned that in the beginning it was, but that was possibly offset with travel. Bill, was that your experience too, or not?
Well, if we define cost, what is all that? You put it all in one bucket. Firstly, you had the cost of the actual lockdown itself, the delay, the cost of not only to Enel, all of our suppliers, the wait, putting a workforce that was fully engaged to putting them all on standby. We're in a situation where, of course, you have to retain this staff, and they're just waiting to go back to work. So we had the cost of delay, cost of progress, and then there was the cost of the mitigation programs that we put in place that we chatted about. Those costs were not I would say a huge cost. We went overboard a little bit at the beginning because we didn't really know how long this was going to last. So we obtained PPE for the long haul. And as things change, we found a good opportunity for us when we had all this PPE that we had much more than the site teams needed. So we were able to, through sustainability efforts, donate a lot to the medical and the government entities and communities. So that was real helpful. So at the end, our projects were delayed, but overall we I would say that the cost impacts were not significant where we could not deal with them. I guess that's and the costs that we incurred were important. Of course, they're necessary in dealing with the pandemic. So when you look at it from that perspective, it allowed us to restart construction. So we were much happy to get this workforce back in the field.
Great. And Hani, so from your perspective, am I right that you were saying from a cost side it was ultimately net neutral, or?
I want to say for the South African projects, yes, we were lucky because of the phase of the project. But I don't want to create the impression that COVID has no impact. The reality is we were done with construction. We were basically waiting for grid. So our impact was fairly manageable in South Africa, but other projects worldwide was really impacted hard by additional storage cost, additional the delay cost. Not only the delay in the project and the actual connection, but the costs involved with this was really significant for the business as a whole.
Hmm.
So in South Africa,
I should have asked this question beforehand. Is Enel buying any turbines from Siemens Gamesa in round 4? Because that would mean you have to be careful with what these answers are. Definitely cost overruns, and they must pay. No, sorry, go ahead, Hani.
No, but unfortunately, if only that was true, I'm not sure how the contracts is structured, but under the force majeure, which I mean, this is obviously a force majeure, the costs were for each party itself. So the storage cost would typically be for the turbine supplier and not for the developer. So it depends on which side of the border you're sitting, how much you're impacted by COVID, but to the business as a whole, there's definitely huge amounts of money flowing to cover these delays.
Hani, you mentioned that internationally it possibly affected you guys slightly worse. Can you elaborate on that, of why the South African situation was then different?
Again, just because of the phase of the project, we were done. Yeah, so we were done with manufacturing, we were done with deliveries, we were even done with construction, and this is the driving factors. If you have components sitting in a port somewhere or sitting in a storage location where the COVID rules does not necessarily apply, because you've been stopped in South Africa, it doesn't mean that you're stopped in China. You're still liable for those costs. So that's the big difference.
All right, and then Hani, you said your team's being very, very localized, and with the flexibility, you didn't then come across huge issues, I assume, with visas expiring or getting in experts in to do work.
To be honest, we tried just to mitigate the risk in terms of this last stages, and it proved to be really a struggle. It was not easy getting any visas, and at the end of the day, we decided we're giving it up and we're trusting the team. And I must say, the team has been really great, Mark. I cannot say it more often than I have the opportunity to do. If it wasn't for the teams that we had, it would have looked a lot different. So,
Hani, did your teams have Bill's smart glasses or not?
We didn't need them. We were smart on site. But definitely, we did make use of foreign support. So Teams meetings, Skype calls, smart glasses. We didn't implement the smart glasses, but we make use of an Apple system where we're basically having the tablets. I think that's the most common quality system at the moment. And so it's not as if we were shut off from the world. We still had the back office support, but I mean, essentially we didn't. We were able to operate and to continue without much delay.
All right. And Bill, from your perspective, because I'm fascinated with these smart glasses, was it a workaround of visa issues, or that was just being used locally in country?
We started using these smart glasses before the pandemic. We invested in that technology before, so it was fortuitous that we had that knowledge, so we could utilize it. Globally, it was things are different. First of all, every country was a little bit unique. South Africa chose to do this major lockdown. No one leaves your place. You can't travel between province. There were certain activities in Europe. In America, each country is unique and different in what they allowed and didn't allow. So the impact to our company was was different it was more regional or country specific. For us, we had numerous projects in various forms of construction. So there's quite a significant difference between when you're construction phase, between construction when you're actually building something and when you're commissioning. Commissioning requires a different set of skill sets. You go live with the equipment, it's energized, it's dangerous, and usually that workforce that does construction, they're used to working around things that aren't energized. So the skill sets and the requirements of those two construction teams are different. So what we did is we utilized this operational staff, and that certainly has knowledge and experience to work around live equipment, and the combination with training, local support, smart glasses, all the various different technologies. We were able to train this local workforce to do the commissioning activities. So that's how it worked out. So and I think as we come up with the best practice now how to do utilizing your operational staff to do commissioning. That those commissioning teams now are going to be very knowledgeable about how this equipment runs, and they're able to do evolutions they don't normally get to do during operations, because you don't shut down and start these equipment like you do commissioning. So it's a valuable training.
And well, I'm aware that there's the construction side, but obviously your back office side is, I mean, that's over 100 people. And that all had to go virtual overnight. I'm assuming that was quite a headache to manage that interface between the office and the site, or was it actually quite easy?
Well, it wasn't easy. I would say the same answer applies, where the company had made an investment in infrastructure. All employees had phones and laptops and things of this nature. When we started with Anel, since our home office is in Italy, the pandemic occurred in Italy and was much worse there before it came to South Africa. So we had a general warning and saw what occurred there. And so we learned from the areas that were more where the pandemic hit harder initially. We instructed our staff, and we went to working from home 2 weeks prior to the mandated lockdown. It was initially it took a little bit of learning to do, as all companies would imagine in this transition. I think the general employees looked at this as very patriotic towards the company. We're going to get through this, and everybody did their best effort to work at home in their safe environment. And ultimately, I think we actually learned a lot about how we can function in a virtual world. Even this conference that we're doing is a virtual conference. We're learning how to do this that we wouldn't have normally thought what the heck we would do this for. So I don't think it was disruptive as I originally would have thought it was going to be. So we've managed to make it work. I think currently, I mean, you can tell I'm still working from my home office or my home, as they say, and our office staff and support staff will continue to do that for even though we've gone to alert level 1. And the reason why is since we have projects in operation and construction, our focus, those individuals, those personnel are actually in the field, and our focus is on them. The people that work, support staff, let's keep them home, let's keep them safe until until we're absolutely necessary to go back to the office. That's how we're working today.
Well, I think it's often referred to as your office that sometimes doubles as a home. Hani, you mentioned that you guys, there were actually some good learnings that you've taken away from what was not obviously globally is a significant disruption to to economies. Do you think you are going to be more efficient at what you do now, based on your COVID learnings? You'd pointed out that there's no need for all the on-site meetings. Do you think that's going to be something that continues, or are we going to quickly get back to the way we used to do it?
Honestly, I think it will continue. I think everybody has matured a little bit with regards to online platforms and got less scared of it and realized, okay, now traveling is actually nice. Certainly there will be a medium where you will travel again, and that's also needed. I traveled to Cape Town last week just to feel normal again, and that was great. But I must admit, I hate the setup of Windaba. For me, this is the one platform that is not working. But yeah, so that's definitely something I think that will maintain. More learnings, I believe, is yet to come. I think we're still in the phase of learning. COVID's long not over, and if the industry sticks to the promises and the government, and we move forward with tendering and starting up new projects, I honestly believe there's a lot of opportunities out there. I don't have them yet, but I'm sure that we should look for them.
Yeah, so I do. I think we'll all join you in. It's great we could do a virtual Windaba this year, but I think we all look forward to being able to do an in-person and in particular attend a gala dinner and post-gala dinner festivities. Because if we're honest, that's the real reason most of us go to Windaba. So Bill, do you have any? We'll put you on the spot. Any concluding remarks on your learnings of going through COVID whilst trying to get your projects to COD, and maybe it's probably not known by everyone, but I mean, I think I stand to be corrected, but you were trying to get 5 wind farms, or are trying to get 5 wind farms to COD during this. So what are your?
We have 5. Well, we have 5 projects in construction. I think that I actually learned that humans are quite resilient. If you look at our situation today, when we first started the pandemic, we were very afraid of it. Because we didn't know. Clearly, this pandemic, the only way for it to grow is human to human, and that requires travel. So the best way to control this is to limit travel and limit human contact. So to establish procedures and policies within our respective companies to limit that, keep people at home. Can we do that and not be disruptive in our everyday business? That within Enel, we were able to do that. Clearly, though, the cascade of the Enel staff, and then construction staff, and then the execution staff, the operations projects that require support and actual functions at the site, that's something different. So we had to learn how to adapt and learn how to coexist with this pandemic. And I think we all have done that. We've done that well as a country. We've done that well as respective companies. And today is a great testament. If you see the number of renewable energy projects that have been placed in service, when the other industries have come to a screeching halt, we have continued to perform, even amongst the pandemic. So it's a hats off to our industry. So that's my closing comment.
Well, I do think that the round 4 projects are going to have the lowest carbon footprint of all the rounds, just by looking at the flights. When I used to fly to the Eastern Cape, the airplane would be full of people somehow linked to wind farms. My recent flight, there were just 3 of us. So yeah, it has changed things. Hani, what are your closing thoughts?
I think Yeah, I've said it really before. I think we're in a great industry. I think we have still a lot to learn and a lot of opportunities to gain. And I think COVID was maybe just the thing we all needed to rattle the cage enough to start thinking about it. So although it created a lot of work and a lot of new things, I see all of this as a big learning curve and as a massive opportunity. And I honestly look forward to the round 5 and maybe the emergency rounds as well. So that's it. And we will see you there. And then Bill, anytime you want to do business, let's talk.
All right. Well, Bill, Hani, Paul, who just joined us virtually, I thank you both. Hani, I like your closing remarks that we should use the impetus of this pandemic, which I think our country is using, for us to now accelerate future wind farms and more renewables. With that, I thank you all, and I will close this session.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.